Hi, everyone, and thank you all for being here today. God be with me. My name is Bill Clabby. I'm Dad's oldest son, and I'm blessed to be named after him. On behalf of my family, my mother, my sisters, and my brother, we want to thank you all for being here today. It means a lot to us. We're here to honor our dad, and we're thankful to you, all of you, for showing your love for our family. Every day, I try to learn from the good lessons he taught me through his examples and words. Our dad, William Joseph Clabby, was an exceptional man. His father was a postal worker, and his mother was a secretary at a local mill. As an only child born in a small town in Idaho, Dad came a long way and made a difference for each of us and so many people through the schools where he taught, our church, our community, our family. He was also courageous for marrying our mom and having 6 kids, especially as an only child. He was centered on his faith, his conviction that anything was possible, and his very strong commitment to family. Nearly every day, he mentioned how important it was to remember that we are a family, and we should not be selfish. We should contribute to the family. We're all here today to show that. Dad was a kind and a caring person. One thing he did when we were young is he'd take us to the tide pools. We'd climb around the rocks, peering into pools. He'd show us sea anemones, chitons, the elusive opali, sculpins, and other wonders of the ocean. The most important lesson he taught, at least to me, that I remember all the time, is he taught us always to respect the life that's there. He said that the rocks were the animals' homes, so if we lifted any of them up, we should put them back where we found them. Dad was also curious about and interested in many people and ideas. The year I studied in France, he wrote to me that I should soak up all the lore and culture I could while I was there. He learned about accepting differences, even with his parents. His mother was of a Protestant Christian background, while his father was Catholic. She converted to Catholicism and was respected by his father. They accepted and loved each other, as we know God loves and accepts each of us. Dad was kind and welcoming of relatives, whatever their background. Even when some of their own relatives had pushed them away, Dad was there to welcome them. I like Dad's way, and I'm sure Jesus would have done the same as he did. I believe my choice of a career in international education, sending American college students all over the world to understand and accept those that are different than them, came as a direct result of Dad's example. Dad was also an innovator, embodying the very spirit of the space age. I got my love of gadgets and building from him, too. Just look at Jones and my Sprinter van out back, and you'll know that that's true. In the mid-1960s, it was not standard to have seatbelts in cars, really. I know you who are younger than us might not remember that, but it was not. So Dad drilled holes in the floor of the car, bought some seatbelts at an auto parts store, and installed them so we would have seatbelts in the station wagon. He also installed solar panels on the roof of our house in the 1970s. That was the Carter administration initiative. He had us all learn about and watch the moon landing on July 20th, 1969 at 7:56 p.m. local time. And he had the TV on so we could all watch it. At less momentous times, he brought the junior high school telescope home to watch Saturn and Jupiter, the moon, and other things in the sky, often inviting his students to come home to watch that in the telescope as well. In more recent years, he was fascinated to see all the ways we use our iPhones, our laptops, Bluetooth speakers, and other technology. He especially liked the Star Tracker and Skyview apps, where he could see the constellations on the phone. I remember Carol was showing him just in the last couple of weeks he was alive. He loved that. He was so excited about that. And he bought an Apple IIe in the 1970s. That's before the Macintosh was invented, and used it for his business accounting. We wanted it for the games, adventure campaign and other games like that. Dad was a great writer and speaker. He was editor of the Gonzaga student newspaper, and he wrote many of our family Christmas cards, Christmas letters over the years. This made the last years all the more difficult for him and for Mom, as he lost most of his ability to speak. I believe Dad took to heart what St. Paul said about love in 1 Corinthians 13. Love is patient, love is kind, it knows no jealousy, it's neither boastful nor proud, neither selfish nor rude. I can tell you that my dad lived by these words and inspired many through his example. But Dad was also part of a loving team. He would never have been able to do all the things he did without Mom, supporting him with sacrificial and persistent love. Mom, I want you to know that we all know this. We recognize all that you've done for Dad and for our family. As Jesus said in the parable of the bags of gold, I'm confident that God will say to you, Mom, when you enter into his kingdom, well done, come and share in your master's happiness. I hope that I too will hear that from God. Dad, I know you're with the loving God who created you in the place he created where there are no limits. We call that heaven. I can only imagine what awaits us there, what we will know and do in the kingdom that Jesus spoke about so personally. Jesus said, in my Father's house there are many dwelling places. If there were not, would I have told you that I am going to prepare a place for you? And if I go there and prepare a place for you, I will come back and take you to myself, so that where I am, you may also be. I look forward to living in heaven someday too, Dad, and all of you, I hope, where love is the law of the land, where Jesus shines like the sun, and as he did on Mount Hermon for Peter, James, and John before he was crucified, and where we spend eternity learning from God and becoming more like God imagined us to be. Thank you again for being here. And my sister Christina is next.
I'm Christina. And yes, as Bill said, all of us learned that communication and collaboration were essential. And he demonstrated this to us in the way he lived his life and the way he interacted with others. It actually led several of us to work toward fluency in other languages. And we all realized this was one way that we could get to that next level. Dad and Mom always set a wonderful example of that loving and healthy relationship. They clearly loved each other, and they often were holding hands. Sorry. It doesn't seem so hard when you're rehearsing it, right? Even as they'd walk up to communion at Mass, they'd be holding hands. And they worked really hard to show others how to focus on and grow their own love for one another. And they did some of the things they did was through the engaged encounter, evenings for the engaged and marriage encounter gatherings. So they both clearly embodied their faith. And that faith was that Christ is the root of the love we experience, and that we then experience that same love in marriage, and that it's then meant to be shared with others around us. Through this involvement, they also showed me how to be a leader in my church, in my work, in my community. As Bill said, anything involving family was important. Birthdays, home masses during the 70s, any of you remember those? Those were really fun. Holidays, graduations, school sporting events, dance or music recitals, and he was always there. One thing I remembered years later was that I would often notice that he'd sneak off near the end of the evening to his office. And then I understood, as I had my own work and other responsibilities years later, that he was prioritizing family and then chose to stay up later than everyone else in order to participate in that event and accomplish still what he had to do. Since these events most often involved a meal, usually a feast, really, Dad always expressed his appreciation for Mom's cooking. He was very clear he was never going to be a cook, and we were all very clear about that. In fact, we all kind of worried a little bit about what would happen if Mom were to go first. How would he sustain himself? And then as we became adults, he would always make sure he expressed how much he enjoyed the wine that Tom bought or the meal that one of us or many of us worked together to prepare. He was showing us how to appreciate one another. Actually, he was showing us how to be part of a cooperative by appreciating the many gifts that we each bring. And this all from one man who was an only child. In addition to how he always treated our mothers so lovingly, he also showed his love for us by helping all of us and each of us experience those special teachable moments in life and recognize them. He was always finding the teachable moment, whether it was on a summer trip, where as we drove along, he would give us a geology lesson, because he was at that moment taking a graduate class in geology, or perhaps he would bring us to the backyard, as Billy mentioned, to share the wonders of the night sky with a telescope that he had brought home from school, or a meteor shower. He gave impromptu physics lessons when we asked a simple question. Maybe we didn't always appreciate that. And he would always take advantage of a situation. Oh, one example he took advantage of was when we went to Idaho to pick up a damaged VW bug from a relative, and he taught me how to drive as we drove back from Idaho. So that was, I didn't get to go to the parking lot like the others did, but I got to drive from Idaho to California as a 15-and-a-half-year-old. Never forget it. And I learned from Dad how to be a teacher, which is what I do now. Every day was full of something that he did, and he could demonstrate that thing or explain that thing that we were experiencing or doing. But through that, he demonstrated a profound and unconditional love. And an example that may seem contradictory for me is when one day I was vacuuming, and I rolled the vacuum over the electric cord, and he raised his voice at me, which the fact I remember this many years later indicates that he didn't raise his voice very often. So he raised his voice to say that, "Don't you know there will be sparks from here to Christmas?" And then once I got over the initial shock, he had to give me the little lesson about why that was. Dad treated each of the 6 of us in such a way that I learned each student has to be appreciated as an individual with different gifts, different needs, different learning styles, and that requires a different or creative, sometimes, approach to that teaching. Same goes for parenting, and I think I learned that from him. As Bill said, he was cutting edge and taught me how to explore new ways to do the things I do and try a new approach. Maybe it's, in my case, it was using that Apple IIe to write my master's thesis when I was trying to use an electric keyboard, a typewriter, what are they called now? And I'd have to rip out the paper every few pages and start over again, so I started using the computer. So always looking for that new view, the new creative approach to things. Dad also taught us that we need to stop and celebrate. We need to relax. We need to appreciate nature, and we need to enjoy one another. Our dad may not have been perfect. In fact, he would often stop, and with a sly smile, he'd say, "What? You don't think I'm perfect?" But he clearly appreciated each and every one of us. He let us know we mattered, that we had gifts to share. And we all knew that he was so appreciative of Mom's efforts over the past several years, even when he wasn't able to express it. And one final noteworthy point about Dad, of course, was his head of hair. He was often complimented about it, even in his last years. And of course, this is a detail I'm reminded of every time I look in the mirror.